Okay, so on our first day of graphing sine and cosine, we just basically looked at the shape of the graph and how to find the amplitude and the reflection on a graph. Or I shouldn't say how to find it, but how to graph it. So for our second day, we're going to look at the transformations. Okay, so those transformations are going to include when the period changes and when you have a vertical shift. Okay, so let's look at example 9. Alright, so for example 9, our amplitude is going to be that understood 1 right here. The period, remember, is 2 pi over b. Well, this is your a, and remember your b is your value between your trig function and the x. So here we got a new b value. That b value is 2. So this is going to be 2 pi over the b value of 2. And 2 divided by 2 gives us 1. So we end up with a new period of pi. Alright, so what does that mean for us? That means by the time we hit pi, we should have a complete cycle. So our amplitude is 1. Alright, now, we know that we're going to need the halfway point, and then we need the halfway point between these two right here, and the halfway point between these two right here. Okay. So let's get to work on finding this. Alright, so this is 1. We need the halfway point, so we've got to come over here and find half of your period of 1. So the period is 1. Well, half of 1 is a half. So that means right here we get 1 pi over 2, or we could just write it as pi over 2. Alright, so here comes the new part. Alright, now I need the halfway point between 0 and 1/2. So if I need the halfway point between 0 and 1/2, I need halfway across. So guess what we're going to take? We're going to take a half. So we're going to come right here and take a half of the half. Well, half of a half, 1 times 1 is 1, and 2 times 2 is 4. So we get 1/4. So this right here is 1 pi over 4. So notice what we did. Here we did half of the period, and then here we did half of the halfway mark. Right. Now, on yesterday's lesson, I showed you that we could come right here and figure out the pattern. Alright, so once you figure out the denominator at this term right here, then we're going to change everything to that same denominator. So this is 1/4. 1/2 is the same thing as 2/4 because 2/4 reduces to 1/2. So everything's going to be fourths. 1 is the same thing as 4/4 because 4 divided by 4 is 1. So you probably already picked up the pattern here. 1/4, 2/4, something fourths, 4/4. So 1, 2, 3. So this right here is going to be 3 pi over 4. Alright, so now let's draw our sine graph. Remember, for sine, we start at the midline, we finish at the period, and in the middle is the crossover point. Then we go to our maximum, and then to our minimum. I'll give you a second to copy that down. Now, as I said in yesterday's lesson, most of the time when I ask you to graph something, I'm going to ask you just to graph one cycle. And here I'm asking you to graph from 0 to 2 pi. Now, if I don't give you the directions on how to graph it, I always assume it's going to be this interval right here from 0 to 2 pi, and then one cycle. Alright, so actually, I'm going to cross through this. I wanted just one cycle. I should have retyped that and put one cycle. Now, as long as I'm asking you for one cycle, I'm going to give you another little shortcut for this point right here. If you notice, we always divide it into fourths. Here's 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. So it's been divided into fourths. To get this point, we take half of the period. To get this point, we take half of the halfway mark. So we take half of a half. This point is 3 out of 4 because it's 1, 2, 3, 4 tick marks. And that one is the third tick mark out of 4. So we could actually come right here and we could say 3/4 times our period. 3/4 times 1 is 3/4, so we get 3/4. So we could right here for that third point right there, we could also say 3/4 times the period. And that would only work to get this first one right here. If I asked you to do more than one cycle, so let's say I asked you to do more than one cycle. All right, we need these other points. Okay, so if that one's 4/4, this one right here would be 5/4, so we get 5 pi over 4. This one right here would be 6/4, but 6/4 reduces by 2, so 6 divided by 2 is 3. And 4 divided by 2 is 2, so that's 3 pi over 2. This one would be 7/4, so 7 pi over 4. And this one would be 8/4, and 8 divided by 4 is 2. So that's why I always like looking at the pattern here, because if you're asked to go beyond one cycle, then this part right here is not always going to work to give you the rest of the points. So here, all right, here's our starting point, our finishing point, crosses over in the middle. This one would go up, and this one would go down. And you can see that we have 2 cycles here because we have a top and a bottom, that's 1. A top and a bottom, that's 2. So this is actually 2 cycles here. And again, I always like just pointing out one of the ordered pairs. So if I ask you for the ordered pair for this one, we usually do x and y. So here our x would be pi over 4, and our y would be 1. It just looks so strange, doesn't it? All right, going to example 10. All right, our amplitude is 2. Now, I'm going to cross this out right here and just put one cycle. Again, I meant to go back and retype that part, but I just forgot. All right, our period is going to be 2 pi over our b value. This was our a, this is our b, so it's 2 pi over 1/2. Well, this is actually 2 divided by 1/2, and we know when we're dividing fractions, we multiply by the reciprocal. So we're going to say 2 times, reciprocating 1/2, we get 2 over 1, so we just end up with 2 times 2, which is 4. So the period here is 4 pi. So that means by the time we hit 4 pi, we should have one cycle. All right, let's do our 1, 2, because we're going to have an amplitude of 2. Our -1, -2. Now, this one is going to be a little easier to do, because this is kind of like common sense. We don't have to work with fractions. All right, so to get the halfway point, we're going to say half of 4. So what's half of 4? Half of 4 is 2. So this is 2 pi. Then we need halfway between 0 and 2. So what's halfway between 0 and 2? Well, half of 2 is 1. So we get 1 pi. So we got 1 pi, 2 pi. I wonder what that one's going to be. Yes, 3 pi. All right, we still got the sine. So the sine starts at the midline, finishes at the period, has to cross over in the middle. It goes up to the maximum, then it goes down to the minimum. Moving right along. All right, so I am going to keep this one as negative 2 pi to pi. Excuse me, negative 2 pi to positive 2 pi. All right, so looking at our amplitude. So remember, that's the number in front of the cosine, so that's an understood 1 right there, so that's the amplitude. So we know we're going to go to a positive 1 and down to a negative 1. The period is 2 pi over b. Well, our b value this time is a 2, and 2 divided by 2 gives us 1, so we end up with 1 pi. So what does this mean for us? That means by the time we hit pi, we should have a complete cycle of the cosine graph. All right, so what I want you to do, I want you to pause the video for about 2 minutes. That's it, 2 as in 1, 2. And I want you to figure out the coordinates for these 3 points right here. So pause the video for about 2 minutes and figure that out for me. All right, so let's see how you did. All right, so this is a 1 right here. Okay, so I need to, that's the period, right? That 1 pi. So I need the midway point. So I'm going to take half of 1, which gives me 1/2. So this right here is going to be pi over 2. Well, now I need halfway between 0 and 1/2. So I need to take half of the midway point of a half. And 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 2 is 4. So this right here is going to be pi over 4. Okay. Now again, if I'm just doing one cycle, I could come right here and say 3/4 times the period of 1 and get 3/4. So that tells me that this right here is going to be 3 pi over 4. However, as I said, I wanted to go from negative 2 pi to 2 pi. So I need these other ones right here. So let's figure this out. All right, so I know I'm going to need a halfway between 1 and 2. So that would be this point right here. And then I need halfway between these 2 points. So that would be this right here. And then I need halfway between these 2 right here. So that would be that point right there. So let's figure out what these other ones are going to be. Again, once you figure out that first value, change all the denominators to that value. So we got a 1/4. 1/2 is the same thing as 2/4. 3/4 is the same thing. Well, it is 3/4. Duh. 1 is the same thing as 4/4. Okay, so then that tells us that that right there is going to be 5/4. So 5 pi over 4. Our next one would be 6/4, but 6/4 reduces to 3/2. So this is 3 pi over 4. Then we got 7/4, so this one right here is 7 pi over 4. And then we got 8/4, and 8 divided by 4 is 2. On some of the quizzes that I'm going to give you in this unit, I'll probably will be asking you, what are the coordinates? I might say, what are the first 8 coordinates on the positive x-axis? And you would have to list these right here. Okay, so now let's graph the right side here. All right, since this is cosine, I know cosine starts at the amplitude. Okay, so my amplitude is 1, so I'm going to come up here to a 1. And it stops at the same height at the period. So the period was 1 pi, so it's going to stop right here. Okay, the midway point is going to be our minimum. And then our 2 sides right here are the crossover points. Alright, so we're going to repeat that process again. Alright, so it starts at the amplitude, and so the amplitude, notice, is 1. It's going to stop at 2 pi, because from 1 pi to 2 pi is another 1 pi unit. The midway point is going to be our minimum, and these two are our crossover points. coming over here to the left side, the negative side, these values are going to repeat. Okay, so let's see. If that's negative 2 pi, this would be negative pi. This is negative pi over 2. And this is negative 3 pi over 2. All right, then we need our 1/4 pi, so this is negative pi over 4. Then the next one would be negative 3 pi over 4. Then our next one would be 5 pi over 4. And then between negative 3 halves and negative 2 would be 7 pi over 4 negative. Alright, so with cosine, it starts at the amplitude and finishes at the period, so it's going to finish right here. The halfway between these 2 points is right here, so that's going to be our minimum. And then these two are our crossover points. And then I get this last one. Alright, it starts at our amplitude. It finishes at the same height at the period. Halfway is your minimum. And then on either side of the halfway point are your crossover points. So this is asking, how many cycles do you see? Alright, so with cosine, we know it's the giant curve. So I'm going to come right here. Alright, here's the giant curve, so that's 1 cycle. Here's the giant curve, so that's another cycle. Here's the giant curve, so that's another cycle. And here's the giant curve, so that's one more cycle. So how many cycles did we just graph from negative 2 pi to 2 pi? And that would be 4 cycles. Alright, so we're going to skip example 12, and we'll go ahead, because this is asking us to write the equation. That's what we're going to do tomorrow. So let's go ahead and go to example 13. Alright, so picking up with example 13, this is where we get our vertical shifts. Okay. Alright, so this is where we're going to either move up or down. Okay, so we're going to be looking at that K. Remember, it's all about the H and the K. So the K is going to tell you whether you're going to move everything up or move everything down. Alright, so focusing on part A, we got y equals the sine of x plus 4. So that plus 4 right there is telling us that we're moving everything up 4. Now, as long as you don't have anything else that's changed, you can literally just come in here and find all your critical points, your crossover points and your max and mins, and move each point up 4 units. So I could come right here and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops, I think I counted too much. Or did I? Nope, that's right. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I wonder what the next count's going to be. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. So if all you have is just a vertical shift up or a vertical shift down, you can literally just take all of your critical points, that would be the crossover points and your max and mins, and move it up 4, or if it was subtracting 4, you'd move it down 4. Okay, so that's what you could do if there are absolutely no changes other than a vertical shift. Okay. Alright. But what I really like doing is just thinking about the midline. Okay. So your midline, the original midline is y equals 0. So right here, this is your original midline. That's the line smack dab in the middle. What we are really doing is we are taking that midline and we're moving it up 4 units. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So now our midline is actually at y equals 4. So that is the new midline. And then once you figure out that midline, all you have to do is think about, well, the sine. Well, the sine starts at the midline. It finishes at the period. Has a crossover point smack dab in the middle. All right, it goes up first. So here the amplitude is 1. So go up 1 and then go down 1. And obviously I drew my midline a little slanted, but we can get the gist there. This still has a height of 1 here, and this should be a height of 1, but I got a little off there. So again, you can do the counting method as long as there's no other changes other than moving it up or moving it down. But the midline method is the best. Alright, so let's come right here and look at part B. Alright, so for part B, we see that we do have a change other than just moving it up or down. Our amplitude is now a 2, and the minus 3 means that we got to move everything down 3. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the original midline and we're going to move it down 3 units. So down 1, 2, 3. So the new midline is now at y equals a negative 3. It's still sine, so let's think about that right there. Sine starts at the midline. It finishes at the period. It crosses over in the middle. All right, and we're just going to do one cycle here. Then I know halfway between these two would be the amplitude. Well, the amplitude is now 2, so from the midline I'm going to count up 2. 1, 2. All right, I know halfway between these 2 points right here would be the minimum, so count down 2. 1, 2. So that's what the new graph would look like. All right, flipping over to part C. All right, our amplitude is now 3. It is minus 4, so it means that we've had a vertical shift down 4 units. And this time is cosine. All right, so remember cosine starts at the amplitude. All right, so I want you to let this one be a U try. So let's take about 3 minutes. I want you to see if you can graph one cycle of this new transformation. So pause the video for about 3 minutes and everybody give it a try. Even if the only thing you can do is just move the midline. Just move the midline. Alright, so let's see how you did. Alright, so we got a minus 4. So that means we moved everything down 4 units. So we're going to take that midline and we're going to move it down 4 units. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so our new midline is at y equals negative 4. Now, since this is cosine, I know cosine starts at the amplitude. So coming right here, from the midline, I'm going to count up 3. 1, 2, 3. All right. And to help me out a little bit, I'm going to come right here and put these tick marks. Alright, so wherever it starts, it also stops. So right here at 2 pi, it's going to stop at that same height. Okay. Halfway is the minimum, so I'm going to count down 3 units from the midline. 1, 2, 3. And these 2 points right here are my crossover points. So if I were to ask you, what is the new minimum of that first cycle, you would come right here and you would say, well, that would be pi for your x, and then your y would be, let's see, that's -5, -6, -7, -7. If I were to ask you, what is the final maximum of that first cycle, that would be this right here. That's the first maximum of the first cycle. That's the last maximum. This right here would be, your x value is 2 pi, and your y value is -1. If I were to ask you, what are the 2 crossover points? All right, this right here would be pi over 2 and -4. And this one right here would be 3 pi over 2 and also -4. Still, even after all these years of teaching it, it still looks weird when I write ordered pairs like that, because we're always used to numbers and not a radian. All right. For part D, okay, what's changed here is this time we've got a reflection. So here this reflects over the x-axis. Our amplitude is 2, and our period, that's a 1 there, so 2 pi over 1 still leaves it at 2 pi. So our period is still 2 pi. And then the +1 means that we're going to move everything up 1 unit. So our original midline was the x-axis, so we're going to move it up 1. So I'm going to go ahead and come right here and draw that in. So our new midline is at y equals 1. And when I ask you for the midline, it's always got to be an equation. Don't just put 1, it's going to be y equals 1. If you just put 1, it's going to be wrong. Alright. So there was no period change, so I'm going to come in here and just put my little tick mark, so that gives me some guidance there. Alright, so amplitude of 2, so we would normally from the midline count up 2. But since it's been reflected, instead of counting up 2, we're actually from the midline going to count down 2. So 1, 2. And remember, wherever it starts, that's where it's also going to stop at the period. Alright, the halfway point was our minimum, but since we reflected it, it's now going to be our maximum. So we're going to count up 2 units. And then the 2 sides right here are the crossover points. All right, and lastly, for E. E is the most difficult one. And it's the most difficult one because it has everything in it that I can give you. It has a reflection, it has an amplitude change, it has a vertical shift, and it also has a period change. All right, so again, that negative right there means it's going to be reflecting, so it reflects. The amplitude is 2. The period is 2 pi over 2, which is just pi. So that means by the time it hits pi, it should be a complete cycle. So remember, that's your amplitude, that's your period. The 3 is your vertical shift, which we know is a K. So minus 3 means it's going to go down 3. So starting at y equals 0, we're going to take that midline and we're going to move it down 3 units. 1, 2, 3. And again, we're just going to do one cycle this time. So the period now is pi. So that means by the time it hits pi, I'm just going to write pi right there just to help me remember. By the time it hits pi, I'm done with the whole cycle. All right, so halfway between these two right here would be pi over 2. This right here is going to be pi over 4. And this right here is going to be 3 pi over 4. And remember, anytime that you might think I'm going a little too fast, you can ask the either the sub to pause the video if we're watching it as a class, or if you're watching it independently, just pause the video. All right. So the amplitude is 2. So normally from the midline we'd count up 2. But since it's been reflected, we're going to count down 2. So from the midline, count down 2. Wherever the cosine starts, it's also going to stop. The halfway point was normally our minimum, but because it's been reflected, it's now going to be our maximum. So from the midline, we're going to count up 2. And these two right here are going to be our crossover points. So if I were to ask you, what is the ordered pair of the first amplitude, it's not amplitude, excuse me, what is the ordered pair of the first minimum of the first cycle? All right, so basically the first cycle is just that one cycle. What is the first minimum? Well, my x value is 0 because I haven't moved left or right, and my y value is -5. What is my first crossover point? All right. Well, my x value is pi over 4. And my y value is -3, because the amplitude is at y equals -3. What's the maximum? All right. Well, that's pi over 2 and -1. What's the second crossover point? That would be 3 pi over 4. And -3. And then what's the last minimum? That would be pi and -5. This would be helpful if you could see it. Alright, so that was the hardest one because it had a whole bunch of stuff going on there. The only thing we haven't done is phase shifts, and we're not going to do phase shifts. Let me rephrase it. We're not going to graph phase shifts. And finally, wrapping up with example 14. Okay, for example 14, I just want you to describe the transformations here. Okay, so we see an A, we see that B, and we see that K. All right, so here the amplitude is 5. So think about what happens. If the curve is usually has a height of 1, but now it's going to have a height of 5, what has it done? It's vertically stretched. So here we're going to say we can have a vertical stretch of 5. Well, I'm just going to put 5 in parentheses. All right, for the period, it's 2 pi over b, and our b is 2. So the period was 2 pi, but now it's gone down to pi. So what has it done? It is horizontally compressed. So this is a horizontal shrink, or we can say compression. And then the -7 shifts it down, so we just simply say it goes down 7. All right, for part B, all right, I see that negative right there, so that lets me know it reflects over the x-axis. All right, I see I've got something behind the x this time inside the parentheses. We'll come back to that in just a second. Let's get the easy part out of the way, the k. All right, the k is a -5, so that means it goes down 5. In yesterday's notes, I gave you a times x minus, oops, let me rewrite this. Give you a times bx minus c plus k. All right, that c I said was your phase shift, which is the horizontal shift. So although we're not going to graph c, I still want us to be able to recognize this. This is x plus 2 pi. So if we pull that out, that's our h. Think of that as your h. If we pull that out, it's no longer a positive 2 pi. It's actually a negative 2 pi. So it always does the opposite of what we think. So we think it should go to the right, but it's actually going to go to the left 2 pi units. And that's all I want you to be able to do with the phase shift. I want you to treat it just like our h. Remember, it's all about the h and k. So if it's a plus 2 pi, we know it goes to the left. If it was a minus 2 pi, we would say it goes to the right. All right, and finally, take about a minute and write down these real quick. So if you'll pause the video for about a minute. All right, let's see what you got. All right, the negative right there means it's going to reflect over our x-axis. All right, the A is our amplitude, so it's had a vertical stretch. Okay, the 4 right here, that's our B value because it's in front of the x. So the period has changed from 2 pi to 2 pi over 4, which is pi over 2, which means it is vertically compressed. So we've had a vertical compression. And then finally, that k value lets us know that we're going to go down 7. Ooh, that's a lot of notes. All right, so if you will, please make sure that you put, go back. I think we started with example 9. So beside example 9, put your name and put the date, and then submit your notes.